Why the media needs a true reckoning about serving the public good, which is the title of our piece over at HartmannReport.com. Donald Trump is the most corrupt president in the history of the United States. And yet, for the last 6 years, including the last year of his presidency, he got better press coverage than Joe Biden has for the first year of his presidency. I mean, and why is this? Where the hell did this come from? Well, the fact is that our media, particularly our broadcast media, is a business. And it profits when viewership and listenership goes up. And Donald Trump, who NBC spent millions to train as a reality TV star, is walking, talking clickbait. Remember Les Moonves back in early 2016 saying, "I've never seen anything like this. This is going to be a very good year for us. Sorry, it's a terrible thing to say, but bring it on, Donald. Keep going. May not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS." Yeah, CBS made profits, NBC, ABC, everything, right across all these networks and media all across the board. And, you know, all we got was this Donald Trump T-shirt. Well, Donald Trump is a president. So what do we do about this? Well, there's a few people who are calling this out right now, and kudos to them. Dana Milbank over at the Washington Post, Eric Boehlert with his newsletter, PressRun.media, Brian Stelter with his show on CNN, Reliable Sources. They have all been pointing out that the media coverage right now of Joe Biden is more negative than the media coverage was for any of Donald Trump's, you know, basically 5 years, arguably 6, in the public eye with regard to this election. And the sixth being this last year, the first being the year of the primary, 2015. We need to do something about this. You know, I started in news in the 1960s at WITL, and I did the news in the morning. And also I was the Capitol and city police blotter. I was on that beat. I remember when Louise and I went, we were dating at the time, and she came with me. We went to interview the mayor of Lansing, Michigan, Jerry Graves, about this new like $1 million piece of art that they had just bought to put in front of the city capitol, or the city, whatever it is, the main city building. And I asked him, you know, so what does this symbolize? And he goes, oh, I don't know, infinity, something like that, you know. It was like, we still joke about it, but it's like, back then we had to report the news. I had a news director, his name was Bob Brakeman, and I was, you know, an SDS kind of, you know, hippie and SDS activist. And I wanted to report the news through my perspective. And Bob was like, no, if you work for me, you're just going to report the facts and let people draw their own conclusions. He said, if you ever have your own radio show, then you can, you know, offer your opinion. We had one in the afternoon on WITL. It was one of the three owners of the show, a guy by the name of Chuck Mefford. He was Chuck Drake on the air. And in fact, I would produce his show from time to time. And that was a 1-hour opinion show every afternoon. But that was it. So anyhow, but that was because we were operating under the fairness doctrine. And it was also because the station was locally owned. That WITL at that time was owned by three guys, three middle-class families, who got together and mortgaged their houses to build this radio station. One was a radio sales guy. He'd been working in the business. Another was Chuck. He was an old radio guy. And then there was an engineer. I forget his name. And the three of them, you know, pooled their money and built this radio station. And you know, back then, I worked at WITL, I worked at WFMK, I worked at WVIC, I worked at WJIM, I worked at a whole bunch of different radio, and WJIM was a TV station. I worked at all of these stations in the late 60s, early 70s. Every single one of them was owned by a local family or a local business that was, you know, basically family owned. Every single one of them. None of them are anymore, to the best of my knowledge. Why? Because in 1996, Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that blew up the law that required local ownership of radio and TV stations and newspapers. So where are we now? Well, as Dana Milbank notes in the Washington Post, quote, Trump got roughly twice as much coverage in 2020 as Biden has received in 2021, and the coverage of Biden is noticeably more negative than the tone of news coverage overall. Predictably, Breitbart and the New York Post are among the most negative outlets, but even liberal ones, such as Huffington Post and Salon, have been negative about Joe Biden. And then Eric Boehlert sums it up. He says, despite the loud claims from journalists that news outlets were tough on Trump for 4 years, it's not true. On the flip side, scribes reject the claim that they've been overly harsh covering Biden in recent months, but they have been. And then Brian Stelter, of course, calls this out on CNN every Sunday. But here's the deal. You know, right now we've got Donald Trump and a Trump faction within the GOP, which is like 90% of the GOP now, who are openly working to subvert our democracy. I'll get into that in just a moment. And we need access to accurate news and information without spin. I mean, it's fine if you're tuning into like my program. This is an opinion show. I don't pretend it's news. I'll share the news and I'll give you my opinion on it. You know, and if you don't like it or you disagree, you're welcome to call up and debate it with me. But that's a completely different thing from news organizations that prior to 1987, when we had a fairness doctrine, had to actually report the news. And prior to 1996, outside of the three big networks, were locally owned, you know, reporting actual news. These are really dangerous times, and having these news organizations put profits over democracy is a sure path to our ending up like Hungary, you know, with Viktor Orban, where he a so-called conservative who is running his country for his oligarch buddies, his stations and targeting minorities, and he has shut down anything resembling a free press in Hungary. You know, we used to have these strict standards because of the fairness doctrine and the ownership rules, and they've been blown up. And frankly, I think that Congress needs to be looking at these things again. They need to be asking the question, should we go back to local ownership rules? Should we be breaking up some of these media monopolies? Is it time for us to revisit the fairness doctrine, maybe in a brand new form for the 21st century, including electronic media? I think it is. Or at the very least, time to start the conversation.